Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar produced by Business Performance USA. We love it when you guys show up, and so thanks for doing that and for being our guest today. I want to tell you a little bit about Business Performance USA. We produce these weekly webinars on Tuesday at noon Central, week over week, and we provide a variety of business insights on topics of interest to business professionals. We are basically a voluntary association and provide this online business information exchange. And when you become a member, you can meet people from across the U.S. who are engaged in business conversations on topics such as we have today. And you can become a member at no cost and engage at any time. Just go to businessperformanceusa.org. One of the many benefits is that you'll be able to hear on demand all of the various webinars that we've presented, and that is, I believe, over 60 at this point, so quite a number. And we have topics such as background screening. We have many different leadership or culture based webinars that we've produced. We've also produced webinars for nonprofits, like Building the Board of Your Dream was last week. So we have quite a variety that can help nonprofits as well as for-profit organizations and help leaders at any level in the organization. So we welcome you today to Business Performance USA. And let me real quick introduce myself. I'm Cynthia Stewart, and I'm your host today. I am a managing partner for my company, Evermore Services, and I help businesses build tomorrow's business today. And as you see, there's Emily. She's our presenter. She has SHOOP training and consulting and loves to talk on issues of culture, issues of team development, team conflict, communication. And I think she's picked a very interesting topic today called nonverbal communication. And just to make sure that you know, I will be monitoring the question box, and we do like to get questions from our audience. So just type in something, and I'll be sure that we pass that along to Emily during the webinar, and you can get your questions answered. And there you see that we have YouTube, bpusa.org for YouTube if you want to go there and see our videos, or also sign up at businessperformanceusa.org. Okay, so that's our little commercial about who we are, and let's go ahead and present Emily. Emily is a speaker and a coach, and she's the creator of Central Illinois' premier team building event called Rally the Team. She's been doing it for several years and works with the local Chamber of Commerce and gets businesses engaged in a very popular program that is team building, and they get to meet other businesses, and it just works out to be a great afternoon. Also, she's created the popular program, the Shoop Shift, 6 gears to rev up your culture, team, and leadership, topics that are precious to her. She's very passionate about those. She's basically the go-to leadership girl when you want to learn how to maximize the efforts of your team, the right way so you can go from being just another manager to being an influential leader. Her clients are leaders who know that they have to get more done with less, and that focusing on their company culture and employees will enable them to be very successful. And you'll find Emily insightful and engaging and very energetic. And with that, I'm going to turn this screen over to Emily. Emily, you can unmute, and I'm going to change the presentation over to you so we can see your screen. And I'll let you know when I'm seeing that. And I don't hear you yet, so be sure to unmute.
Alrighty.
Ah,
You're
we
right.
gotcha. Yay. Okay, Emily, I'm going to let you take it away.
Okay. Well, welcome everybody. I am excited about this topic. It has come up a lot for me lately with my clients, and the whole, the message that we're sending to our coworkers that we don't really realize that we're sending. And then I kind of had a good chuckle over the fact that I decided that nonverbal communication would be a great thing to share with everybody over a webinar where you can't see me. So I really had to think hard about that. Like, well, that was poor planning on my part. It's really hard to show nonverbal communications when you can't see the person. But I think that that just speaks to the importance of nonverbal communication, and there are so many pieces to it. And So when I was going into the topic today, I was thinking, what could we do in order to help everybody do a little bit better? And there's a lot of times where we focus uh, on the negatives and what we know people shouldn't do. So I want to try to show you some things that you can do. And I was just reading an article about personal improvement and ways that you can improve in your life, and whether it be athletics or any other performance area in your life. And it was talking about how you can either remove some of the negative or you can work on increasing the positive. So I wanted to work a little bit on increasing the positive today and not just focusing on the negative, but we're going to cover both for you. And so is a lot that you're telling your team when it comes to your nonverbal communication, and that's what we're going to dive into today. So the first thing that I find that people accidentally share with their teams as a leader is don't approach me. And that one always seems like a big surprise. Of course, everybody wants to be approachable as a leader, but there are many situations where that's just not the case. And unfortunately, the leader doesn't realize that they're sending that message. And so here's a good picture of somebody who's got his angry eyes on, or his frustrated look, and to me his eyes are telling me that I'm I am not approachable. You can't come and ask me a question at this moment. And there are a lot of times where I've been walking around offices and interacting with people, and they don't realize that they have this look permanently on their face. Sometimes this is your thinking face. Sometimes this is your um, how am I going to handle that next meeting, or how do I get this all done and I haven't even had lunch yet today, kind of face. And so there are a lot of times that your eyes are giving away uh, what it what it is that you're thinking, but not necessarily how the message that you want to share. So most of the time we want to be approachable, but a lot of times our eyes are making it so that we look unapproachable. And so what are your eyes saying? This is something that it may seem kind of silly, but you can pull out a mirror and take a look. And when you're conversating, when you're just talking, look at how your eyes naturally go. There's sometimes people can really, they give across, so they might not be looking angry all the time, but they might give across that bored or indifferent look, or that they're thinking about something else. And there's a lot that we, as the recipients of nonverbal communication, we read into your eyes. And I thought this was just kind of a fun picture for the anime um, eyes, but it's so true. And if you ever question what your eyes look like, if you're really stuck in saying, I don't know what kind of nonverbal information I'm giving through my eyes, ask a child. It is so funny how perceptive they are to what your eyes are sharing, and their eyes are super expressive too. They're usually, you can see happy or sad very easily, and they don't have a lot of normal. It's usually they're always expressing something. So ask a child what your eyes are doing, and they'll give away what you what kind of message you're sending. But really, it's something that if you take a minute to just think about your eyes, you might have been squinting at your computer screen when somebody walked into your office. You might have, like I said before, been deep in thought about something else. And so that facial expression then gets carried over into what um, whatever the question is that your employee has to ask. So if they walk in and say, I've got a question for you about this project, and you don't adjust your facial expression, your eyes, then they might instantly be reading into everything that you say, whether or not you mean it. So what you want to do is make sure that you keep your eyes wide, so they're open, they're just relaxed as much as possible, and you will become more approachable to others. And it sounds simple, but what you don't want to do is not make them too wide, right? Because then you start to look scary and surprised all the time. And Cynthia, have you seen this in the places that you've been working before, where people are just they don't realize the expression their eyes are giving off?
Oh, absolutely. I think what is it sounds like something that you could actually talk about with your team. And I never thought to talk about with my team, the expressions on my face or my eyes in particular. But that seems like a great point. And here's what I have observed. I have observed, especially with employees, in working with their boss or someone in authority, um, that they will often interpret the wrong meaning behind things. They often think that if their boss is upset, it might be them. They take things personally. And
Mm-hmm.
so it makes a lot of sense to kind of just talk with your team about, look, when I'm, if be sure to ask me if you have a concern about what I'm thinking, or if you think that there's something going on, because a lot of times it's not you at all. So I just, that's what I think is so important about this nonverbal, is how people misinterpret, I might add, misinterpret, your nonverbal communication, especially with the eyes.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's going to be the underlying theme throughout all of these that I share with you guys today. And your eyes are really the biggest one. And unless you play a lot of poker, or you walk around with sunglasses on, it's the one that gets misinterpreted the most. And where people and there's times where too people don't. You can be having a conversation with somebody and you think it went one way and they thought it went another way, but that other person won't necessarily be able to tell you what it was. Like they'll just say, I just had this feeling that that's not what you thought, or that's not what you meant. And it's interesting because sometimes they can't pinpoint it, so it's such a almost like at a subconscious level where, oh, they're I knew, if it wasn't a blatantly angry face, which is what we always think about, and we know not to do that most of the time. There are times where it's appropriate, but most of the time you don't aren't super angry, but your eyes can give it away if you're not fully engaged in that conversation at a time. So again, you want to make sure that you're looking at your eyes being nice and wide and relaxed as much as possible. And that's just a simple thing that you can think about in your next meeting when you're talking to somebody. Just I'm just going to relax my face a little bit. It might be good for wrinkles too. I'm not sure. Okay, so the first message was don't approach me. So you can be come across as unapproachable if your eyes don't seem open and welcoming. And then the next one that we accidentally share with people is that I'm not interested. And as a leader, there is a lot of information that you need from your team day in, day out. And the last thing you want to come across is that you're not interested in what your team has to say. And so the most important thing is going to be to maintain eye contact when somebody's talking to you. And I put this picture out there because obviously that's an extreme. I assume you're not, closing your eyes and falling asleep in a meeting when your employee is up giving a presentation. But there are a lot of times where we disengage eye contact and don't realize it. For me, I'm a heavy note taker, so that I can remember things later, and it just helps me stay focused. But I have to remove my my eyes shift when I take notes. So while it's not bad that I'm taking notes, if I take notes too excessively, I lose the connection with the person that I'm talking to, and it might seem, although I'm writing a lot, that I'm not as interested because I'm not maintaining eye contact with that person. And then two, with cell phones or laptops or iPads or whatever device you may have, um, it may seem harmless while somebody's speaking to quickly check something. And it's funny because when you share this with people, we know not to do it, that it hurts conversations if we check our phones or our email or whatever the case may be. But there are so many times where we make an excuse and say, yeah, but in this situation, it's okay. And I would like you to look at it as I would err on the side of not checking your phone when you're in a conversation or not checking your laptop as much as possible. And I heard somebody who was interviewed the other day sharing that one of their new productivity tools that they're using a lot in their team was to do video chat. So they would get on Skype and have conversations because they did a poll, an anonymous poll, and found out that among their team, they would be on the phone with each other, and there would be all sorts of crazy things happening, like folding laundry, which you could probably pay attention while you're folding laundry. But then maybe the other, one lady said that she had to chase her dog down the street because the dog got out. And, you're in these big, important phone call meetings, and not everybody's able to maintain eye contact. So it hurts the conversation. And so, really thinking about that as a way to make sure that your team knows that you're interested in what they're sharing with you. Oops. And so when you look at this conversation, everybody looks highly engaged and they're focusing, and she has a laptop there, but she's not looking down at it. There could be things that you're sharing. So if you're looking at a screen together, that's one thing, but you're showing that you're interested in the conversation. You're not multitasking at the same time. And that really will help people stay engaged in the conversation that they're having with you, sharing the most important information that you need as a leader in order to successfully run your team. But then also look at it from the other perspective. If you came up to one of the people on your team and you were asking them a very important question and they never reciprocated eye contact, how would you feel in that situation? So you're teaching people how to have conversations with you. And most of us, most humans, prefer more eye contact. So give out more eye contact so that you get it back. Is that something, Cynthia, again, that you've seen a lot of, I'm sure?
Well, I can certainly say that I relate to the whole taking notes. And so I've had to figure out how to balance that. I'm interested in what you do. What I do is I take real cryptic notes, like I'll write something, maybe not even look on my paper. I'll have my paper there and my pen in hand.
Mm,
If I if if I'm if I haven't set a relationship with someone and I'm really interested in doing that, I make sure that I don't spend a lot of time taking notes. And then when I leave them, I'll write down everything I can remember. And that really helps my note taking. Or I do the cryptic notes and then go back and make sure I fill it in right afterwards. And that really helps. So I, those are some things I do to deal with that. Gee, I need to write it down to remember it. Uh,
mm-hmm.
Issue that I have, I call myself someone without auditory memory. So, but what do you do to deal with that issue of taking notes, getting your notes down, but not losing contact?
Well, and it sounds like I approach it very similarly. And one of the things that I do make sure is that I share that I take a lot of notes when I'm talking, and here's why. So that again, it's that underlying understanding of why I'm writing so much. And then and then two, I try to, like you said, I leave a buffer after meetings so that I can dissect my notes and make sure that I have stuff. And it's funny because it's definitely a balance, because there's times where I've been in meetings, or one of the things that I just cannot understand how people can do it is when a waiter or waitress comes up to your table and they don't write down your order. And all I can think is, when I used to waitress, I couldn't remember if a table needed ketchup by the time I got to the kitchen if I didn't write it down. So how can they remember my whole order? So it is part of being engaged is taking the notes and following along, and that's part of showing interested, that showing that you're interested. But if you never look up, that's where it becomes a problem. And so I like to explain it, and then, like you said, I take just enough notes. I don't try to write verbatim down the conversation, but then, keywords, and then make eye contact as long as possible, jot something down, and then I move on. And then after the meeting, like you said, try to write it out a little bit more. Or what I'll do sometimes, because the whole point of taking notes for me is to remember, especially if I have an action step. So then I like to follow up with an email saying, this was my understanding and here's what I'm going to do. Let me know if I missed anything. And so then that way I get it out there and it's documented. Um, and we both have a copy of it then at that point.
One thing that I like, Emily, when people are in meetings with me, and I tend to not do a device. Like I won't look at my cell phone, my iPad, or a computer. I tend to like to just walk in and it's been hard for me because I have all of those devices and I like to use them, but it's been hard for me not to walk in with a pad of paper. But one thing I like that is when people are expecting a call, they let me know. Or if they, most people anymore just leave their cell phones on the desk. And if they look down and they see usually that it's, for instance, my wife, my husband, or my child, I actually like it when they go ahead and let their wife, husband, or child interrupt because, that says that they're really trying to balance their life.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what I wouldn't like is another client, or what I like is that they explain to me and apologize for interrupting, but let me know I've been trying to get a hold of this person for 3 days, and I'm sorry. May I interrupt? So they invite you in to say, yeah, sure, go ahead, it's fine. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and most people will say, yeah, sure, go ahead, it's fine. Rather than say, well, no, I don't have time to wait for you to, to do X, Y, Z. So I think there's ways to deal with those interruptions that are still honorable and still let them know that you're interested, but that, you know, for whatever reason, you need to go ahead and take a call. But those
Yeah,
are
and
things that
exactly.
you just have to work it out with each person.
Yeah, and the whole point is to make sure that people know that you're interested, and especially when you're a leader, leading your team, they're doing work for you and on your behalf, and the last thing you want them to think is that you're not interested in the work that they're doing. That can just deteriorate on so many levels, and also you want to make sure that they're interested in you when you're speaking. We reciprocate what we get, and so that's just one of those steps, right? How am I making sure that I'm not sending the message that I'm not interested? The next problem that we accidentally share and put out there for everybody is that I'm too busy. And this is one of those things where I really had to come to terms with it myself as I moved into leadership roles, because I think that it's one of those things where as a society, we're concerned that if we don't seem busy enough, we must not be working hard enough. And as a leader, you have a lot of thinking to do, you have a lot of reflecting to do, and have a lot of leading the team that doesn't involve being crazy busy all the time. So if you are sending the message that you're too busy too often, then again, your team is going to always be too busy for you in return, and that's not necessarily the most productive. And then and then you might not get the information that you need to make the best decision. You might not have all the information you need to reflect and come up with the next best idea if you seem too busy, and so somebody doesn't want to bother you with the fact that on this production line there's a huge gaping hole and it's never gonna, we're never gonna get ahead unless we fix it, but you're too busy, so I can't bring that up to you. So we don't want to be sending that nonverbal message. And so one of the things that a lot of people that I know have walking conversations or standing conversations, you bump into somebody in the hallway, oh, I had to tell you something, or um, you're in a meeting together, and then right after the meeting, somebody wants to ask a quick question or share something with you. And so one of the things that we really don't think about much is what we're doing with our feet. And our feet will sometimes tell what we're thinking before we realize that we're thinking it. And so if you are standing and talking with somebody and you start turning your feet away and start moving so that you're pointing your body in a different direction, that is actually, again, at a very low level, sharing with the person that you are disengaged in their conversation, that you're ready to move on to the next thing. And so the longer you can stand there with your feet facing them, that you're fully engaged in this conversation, then you won't give them the impression that you're too busy to talk. And I know there have been many people that I've talked with, many leaders that have said, well, I was available. I was standing there and I wasn't doing the angry eyes, and I told them they could tell me whatever it was they needed to share, but for some reason they didn't share it. And so that was one of the things that then we found through asking people, oh yeah, he always turns and starts walking before I'm done talking, so I quit talking sooner so that doesn't happen to me. So again, your feet are just something that you want to be thinking about what they're doing too. And we all know that we, everybody has nervous tics, but sometimes when you start bouncing or tapping your feet, we know that those can mean that you're impatient. It can also mean that you're cold or you're fidgety, but think about the person who's receiving that message and adjust how you move your feet as well. And then another piece to think about when it comes to um, being too busy is how are you standing? So we're looking at your feet position before, but now how are you standing? And as you can see here, everybody except for one person is leaning in and working on the project together. And and I was thinking about when I looked at this picture, and at first I thought, well, everybody's pretty engaged. And then the more I thought about it, like I've been that guy where I've had my hands in my back pocket and I'm just kind of taking it in and thinking about it. But usually, if you watch group dynamics, usually that person can be the one who is not really contributing or has a thought and they don't share it because they don't want to, have a conflict, or they don't think the idea is valid, or they don't know how to express it. So there are times where you're sending a message that you're too busy or you're not interested in what's going on just by not fully engaging in what everybody else is looking at. And so that is, again, just a really simple nonverbal cue that you would think, well, I was there, I was at the meeting, I was looking at the same thing everybody else was, but you send just a little bit different message there. So that so that's just one of the things that I want you to look at when it comes to standing, and we're going to go into a little bit different piece next. So the next one, when you're having a conversation with somebody, one of the nonverbal cues that you can give out there is that I'm not listening, which again, as a leader, is a pretty bad message to be sending out there. You don't want people to think that you're not listening to them. And one of the huge things that I've found with conflicts and and people being happy in the workplace, it has to do with them feeling like they've been heard. And if you think about it, you yourself would want to make sure that you're being heard. And so you want to, as a leader, make sure that everybody else feels like they're being heard as well. And so on the picture before, we were looking at when you were standing, how are you leaning and how are you engaging in that conversation. But if you look at yourself in a meeting or if somebody comes into your office, how do you lean when somebody is carrying on a conversation with you? And again, it's just one of those things where most people don't really think about. Um, my husband deals with this a little bit due to his size. So if he's a person who's he's 6'4", so he's pretty much too big for every standard office chair. So for him to be comfortable, he's always leaning in different positions, but that sends a different message to the people that he's talking to. So that's something that he's had to work on himself. But you see where this gentleman is with the blue tie on is kind of leaning back and looking at his pen and doesn't really seem interested. And then this person over here with the white shirt is talking and the other person isn't necessarily engaging. So you want to make sure that you're leaning in to show engagement. It's such a simple shift there between the two pictures, and he still can be fidgeting with his pen all he wants, but it shows a completely different level of engagement to be leaning forward into the conversation, to be looking up instead of down. It kind of builds on all the other pieces that we're talking about. So you just want to make sure that even though it may seem more comfortable, and I'm not saying you should go around being uncomfortable all day, don't get me wrong, but there are times where you're in important conversations and how you sit is going to make a huge difference. So if you're leaning forward into that conversation, it'll show much more engagement in what the other person has to say. And Cynthia, is that something that you have seen as well, as far as somebody who always seemed like they were not engaged because they were leaning back?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a couple of things there. The eye contact, of course. Um, it just looks like the pen's a lot more interesting than the person talking.
Absolutely, yeah.
But I do think I think it's just good to every now and then check yourself
Mm-hmm.
And just, I think we want to be engaged, most people, or maybe we want to be bored and disinterested and those other things. But as a leader, it's really important to watch yourself and watch your team. And so these are good signs to pick up on yourself, but also those on your team or those that you're meeting with. Maybe they're not on your team, but those that you're meeting with, and catch them after and kind of inquire and probe a little bit about what's going on. Again, we can really fill in the blanks incorrectly. Like we may think this young guy here sitting here is not engaged when he just got some really bad news that he's having to process.
Mm-hmm.
And so um, these techniques are really important to not only watch ourselves, but to really begin to probe because we may get the wrong impression. And so dealing with inadequate information often will fill in the blanks in the wrong direction. So I think that just be sure that if you have the impression that he's disinterested, just ask what's going on. Make sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's a huge thing too. One of the things that I think we step over, we assume everybody knows how to be successful in our organization. And what may be completely acceptable behavior in one organization can be completely unacceptable behavior in another organization. So what I like that you touched on talking to the individuals about how they might be sitting. And so one of the things as a leader, people are going to mirror your actions. So if they see you doing things, they're going to do the same things because you are the picture of success. But then you can take it another level where if they're not mimicking that behavior and you're not exhibiting or that behavior, but you would like them to change or whatever the case might be, is to teach them the message that they're sending in, like you said, in a simple conversation afterwards saying, this was the message that I got during the meeting. Is that what you meant? Is that what you meant to share? Is that the vibe that you meant to throw out there? What's going on? For all we know, he could have a huge meeting, where he's presenting in, 15 minutes and he's going through his notes in his head over and over and concentrating on that pen because that's what's helping him stay focused and disengaged because he has something really big going on or, his dog got sick or who knows what could be going on. But in the moment, especially as the leader, you want to be looking at how you can be showing people that this is how we successfully communicate with each other. And most importantly, you want your team to know that you're listening, and so that they will share more information with you. Time and time again, I see where people, the leaders wanted more information, they wanted increased communication. I think that's probably one of the number one reasons why I'm brought into an organization is because they want to increase communication, and it's simple things like this where the doors weren't open for people to communicate with the leader. And so that's why I wanted to make sure that I shared that with you. That's a simple way to open the door. Okay, and that kind of leads us right into don't bring problems up. There are a lot of times where, again, people say, I didn't know that there was a big hole in our shipping process and that things weren't going well or that we could never be more efficient here. And the problem is that the message got out there that it wasn't okay to bring up problems. And I think as a leader, that's the worst thing you want. And a lot of times I'll ask people, so how's your team doing when I start working with them or get introduced to their team or introduced to the leadership, and they'll say everything's great. And I'll say, and how do you know? And they'll say, well, because nobody's complained about anything. And I actually think that's the worst thing if nobody complains about everything. And not that you want people, again, going around just being negative and complaining, well, I really wanted the walls, to be beige and not tan. You don't want people complaining about things that don't really affect the productivity at work. But what you do want is to know when there's an inefficiency. And one of the things that people ask is, how can I get people to be problem solvers and how can I get them to be more innovative? And you as a leader have to create the environment in order for that to happen. And one of the things that happens is your nonverbals make it so that people don't think that they could bring a problem up. And so one of the simplest things that you can do in order to get people to bring information to you and bring problems to you is to wear a smile through the problems. And I know that might sound really cheesy because if it's a problem, it might be considered a bad thing. But if you think about how scary it can be as an employee to bring a problem to a leader, especially if it's a problem that's costing the company money, and maybe that person doesn't have any idea how to fix it, but they know you need to know. If they're afraid to tell you because you are scaring them away with your facial expressions or any of the other nonverbals that we've talked about, um, you're just not going to know, and your whole team is not going to be able to be successful because of it. So you want to make sure that you wear a smile. And the cool thing about smiling, is probably one of my most favorite things, is that it is super contagious. And so again, when you talk with your team and you want them to bring you problems and you want them to approach things as a challenge and not a setback, I hear all these things from different leaders. I want my team to go at a problem like it's a fun thing. Well, then you have to show that it is a fun thing and set that environment up. And really, it does start with smiling. And if you want to go into work where everybody is happy, it starts with you as a leader being happy. And it seems like a simple thing, but again, I know everybody has super long to-do lists, and your email inbox is filling up while we're talking, and all of that. So it's very easy to walk around actually with no expression on your face. Like this guy almost in the middle here, almost always, you know, that's the position that I see most leaders walking around in. And that non-expression is telling people more than you really want them to. What you really want is for people to see you with that big smile and a natural smile. We're not talking clown smiles, but just a natural smile and engaging and being open to bringing anything that comes your way. We'll figure it out. And that helps a ton in organizations. And so as I was thinking about everything that I've shared with you so far with different facial expressions and how your feet are pointed and making sure that you have your eye contact and you're smiling and everything, there are times where you need to feel like you've really stepped up as a leader, that you feel more powerful. And so one of the it's a body movement thing, so I put it in with a nonverbal, and I think that you'll see the connection here. But if you want to feel more powerful, more confident in what you're sharing with your team or with your leaders or your peers or your potential clients, one of the things that you can do in order to boost how you feel physically, which is super cool, is you can strike a pose. You can stand like Superman or Wonder Woman, whichever you prefer to model yourself as, and studies have been done to show the power of standing in that pose. So if you stood in that pose for about 2 minutes and then went into a tough board meeting or a tough meeting with your team, or you're really just working on amping up the energy that you bring into each conversation that you have, if you stand in that pose for about 2 minutes, it will boost um, the chemicals inside you and make you feel more powerful, and not in a I'm going to dominate the room kind of way, but in a I'm going to stand in my own personal power kind of way. And it is really neat. I do it before every time I get on a webinar. I do it before I speak in front of a group. I do it before I meet with people, even on the phone. I will stand up, and it just puts you in a much better spot. And I think that a lot of it has to do with the fact that we sit down and we slouch so much, we curve our shoulders over, we kind of hunch down all day long over our computers and kind of make ourselves really small. But then as leaders, we're trying to engage and empower our teams, and we can't do that from a cowering small place. We need to do that from a full, authentic place. And so this striking a pose trick is really something cool that I've found in my studies, and I'm super glad that I found it. And if that feels too awkward for you, you can do this one. You can put your feet up on the desk, and again, I know that that may seem super silly, but it's considered a power pose. And so if you sit like that for a couple minutes before you go into something, you will bring a lighter, more confident sense about you. That'll make your facial expressions easier. That'll make how you stand easier. That'll make your eye contact easier. Your tone of voice, which we didn't go into, that it'll make that easier. It will make you seem more engaging. Now, I'm not saying you sit like this throughout the entire conversation, and I'm not saying you stand like this through the entire conversation, but if you do it for a couple minutes before the conversation, if you can, it'll really help to boost how you feel going into your next meeting, into your next conversation, and it'll really help your nonverbals get amped up a little bit. Okay, so when it comes to the nonverbals and what you're telling your team, we want to make sure that you are maintaining eye contact. That is most critical, and finding a way that it balances for you and for your team and for your personal style. And like we were talking about before, with taking notes, making sure that makes it all balances out. And then you want to lean in to the conversation as much as possible. Show that you're engaged. Show that you are um, interested in what's going on. And it's just such a simple thing. It doesn't cost any money to lean in, and you'll get more out of the engagement that you're in, out of the conversation. Smile. It really is contagious. And one of the funny things too about smiling is if you smile, you will start to feel happier. So even if you don't feel happy right now and you just say, well, I'm going to smile when I go into this meeting, and you smile, and then all of a sudden you just feel happier. So it's one of those neat little tricks. And then again, striking a pose to kind of give yourself that little bit of a boost. It's an energy boost. It's a confidence booster. It's a way to feel stronger going into a conversation, and gives you a better way to approach that conversation. And now I would like to ask Cynthia, has there been any questions that popped up, or did any questions pop up for you while we were talking just now?
Well, I I don't know about questions. I do have a few comments. I think strike a pose is really interesting. I've never even thought about that, and it makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
I do speaking, and so somebody one time said, "Well, those little snow globes, shake the snow globe, and as you watch the snow settling to the bottom, that's your energy settling down, so you're not nervous." So in a
Mm.
way, I've used that. That's kind of a similar thing dealing with your own energy. But I like that. I like that Wonder Woman pose. I may have to strike that pose a few times.
Yeah. Well,
And
there was a TED Talk that I watched about it, and I'm trying to blank on the woman's name, but they'd done a study for interviewing job interviews. And if you did those poses, you did some sort of power pose before you went into a job interview, you could have the exact same resume, the exact same answers, and do better in your job interview.
Interesting. So that nonverbal communication, it's all in the power. And Emily, like you, I've worked in kind of this digital sphere, this electronic sphere or virtual sphere, if you will. So I would say, and wouldn't you agree that that tone of voice has a lot to do, that people can hear the smile in your voice or the upbeat? Do you want to talk about that real quick? We have a couple minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny that you say that tone and the speed of your voice makes a big difference. And so people can hear faster than they can read, and so a lot of times people aren't speaking fast enough. And I listen to podcasts a lot when I'm driving, and one of the things I love about it is that with different depending on which app you're using, you can speed it up. So I can listen to it at 1.5 times, and it's funny how much more engaged I can get when that goes a lot faster. And but yes, the tone of voice that you have, some of the studies will show you that, and I'm sure you've seen this from your own experience. Each and every person that's listening is the more you use your hands, the more the sound comes out better. It opens you up more. We usually joke because there's different areas of the United States where hands are used a ton versus other areas, and joke around about, well, if I had to sit on my hands, I wouldn't be able to talk. And that's actually true. It's hard for you to open up and fluctuate the tone of your voice without your hands moving. And another big thing, especially if you're like us, where you're maybe having virtual conversations, you're over the phone or um, over video or what the case may be, over the internet somehow. I always stand because it gives the sound of voice better. It gives me more oxygen to get out there. But then really you want to make sure that your tone, um, and I think we've all been in a situation where somebody was really monotone, and that can really suck the energy out of the room. And what I don't want you to do is to add false energy to something. But if you're excited about something, show it in your tone of voice. Get a little excited. Have the highs and lows in how loud you talk and how quiet you talk. I naturally talk really loud, so I have to kind of watch myself so that I don't shout at everybody. And I know some people naturally talk really quiet, so they have to be careful to not whisper to the point where people can't hear them. Um, but I think the other pieces, if you're working on eye contact and smiling and facing the conversation, I think the tone of voice will come across really well. Um, it's hard to smile, have relaxed eyes, and sound really angry. So I think it all works well.
Well, thank you, Emily. You want to tell us, I guess, what's next?
Yes. So I have for my next webinar, it'll be all about creating your culture for 2015, and we'll be talking about steps to take to create your culture and really how to make it an intentional action for 2015.
Okay, great. I'm going to go ahead now and change presenters because I have one more slide that will tell them what's coming up. So I've done that. Let me get the slide where it needs to be. Okay, and I'll show my screen now. Hopefully you'll see it. I'm going to talk about trust. So I'll be doing the webinar next week. I guess you could call it our Thanksgiving special. And there's a topic that I really like, and that is actually that trust delivers profits. A lot of people don't think about it like that. They don't even put those two words in the same sentence. And yet studies show that that is the case. And so I want to talk about that. So how do you make sure that you're a high trust business so you can deliver those high profits? Then we'll have coming up in December, we'll come back around to Nancy Roberts and Matt Graham from Track One, and they do give incredible information on background screening. This one will be about filling in the gaps from resumes. They generally speak from the employer perspective, so they help people know what to do when you are hiring candidates and you're looking through lots of resumes and how to use your background screening there. And then we're going to come around to Dr. Jeff Stewart. Jeff Stewart is the on the advisory board for the American Society for Business Competitiveness or American Society for Competitiveness. So he speaks frequently about this idea of competitiveness, and he's going to talk about his O cubed excellence. So if you want to find out what O cubed is, you got to come hear him on the boundary conditions for business competitiveness. And then we're back around to Emily. Okay, folks, so we're so glad to have you here today. Thanks for your comments and questions. I enjoyed hosting you, and thanks a lot, Emily. A topic that I don't think a lot about, but I should. So thanks for bringing that to us, and I agree that bringing it into the world where we can't see you was a really interesting task. But offline, I'll have to find out where you got all those great pictures. So thanks, everyone. Thanks. Come back and see us next week, and come back